Carlos Alcaraz.
King Carlos crowned, the greatest sportsman on the planet, and a throne under threat. Ladies and gentlemen, gather around, because what happened in Madrid last night was nothing short of history. A 22-year-old kid from Palmar, a tiny town in southeastern Spain that most of the world had never heard of, walked into the Palacio de Cibeles, one of the most iconic buildings in all of Europe, and picked up an award that put his name alongside the greatest athletes the planet has ever produced. We're talking Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, Lionel Messi, Usain Bolt, and now, officially, undeniably, Carlos Alcaraz. That's right. The 2026 Laureus World Sportsman of the Year is Carlos Alcaraz. And if you thought this moment was always inevitable, you are absolutely right, but that doesn't make it any less spine-tingling to watch it actually happen. Let's set the scene, because context is everything. The Laureus World Sports Awards, often called the Oscars of sport, took place in Madrid on April 20th, and the choice of city was no accident. This was a homecoming, a coronation.
And the Laureus World Sportsman of the Year is Carlos Alcaraz.
Spain rolling out the red carpet for her golden son. And Carlos showed up in style, looking every bit the superstar he is, stepping onto that carpet draped in elegance, and with a very conspicuous wrist brace on his right hand. We'll get back to that. Trust me, we will get to that. Because as glorious as this night was, there's a shadow hanging over it that every tennis fan needs to know about. But first, the glory. Because it deserves its full moment. Carlos Alcaraz was chosen ahead of some of the most extraordinary athletes on earth right now. His fellow nominees were Jannik Sinner, Tadej Pogacar, arguably the greatest cyclist alive, the legendary Armand Duplantis, who keeps casually rewriting the laws of physics every time he picks up a pole, Ousmane Dembele, and Marc Marquez. That is a list that would make any sportsman's head spin. And Alcaraz beat every single one of them. The Laureus Academy, a panel of sporting legends who actually understand what elite performance looks like, looked at all of those candidates and said, no, the best of the best in 2025 was the Spaniard with the forehand that could slice through granite and the backhand that makes grown men weep. And honestly, it wasn't even close. Let's talk about what Alcaraz did in 2025, because sometimes you need to just lay the numbers out and let them breathe. He won 8 titles on the ATP Tour, the most of any player on tour that year. He finished the year with 71 wins and just 9 losses. He captured 2 Grand Slam titles, at Roland Garros and at the US Open. He won 3 Masters 1000 events. He reached the final at Wimbledon. He reached the final at the ATP Finals. And in a season when Jannik Sinner was also playing some of the greatest tennis we have ever seen, Alcaraz somehow managed to edge him out in the end-of-year rankings and reclaim that #1 spot. And before we move on from 2025, can we please talk about that Roland Garros final? Because historians will be discussing that match for decades. Alcaraz against Sinner on the clay of Paris. 2 of the most ferocious competitors of their generation, locked in a 5-set battle that had the crowd in Chatrier absolutely losing their minds. Alcaraz was 2 sets down. He was staring at the exit. Three championship points slipped away from him as Sinner stood on the brink of his first French Open title. And then, as if channeling every great Spanish warrior who ever walked onto a clay court before him, Alcaraz dug deeper than any of us thought humanly possible and won that match. He won it in 5 sets. He saved those match points. He climbed out of that hole and he stood on top of it. That, in a single match, is why Carlos Alcaraz is the Laureus World Sportsman of the Year. That's what separates him from everyone else. The will. The refusal to accept defeat. The ability to reach into his chest when everything is falling apart and find something extra that nobody knew was there. And if 2025 was incredible, 2026 picked up right where it left off. Alcaraz opened the year by winning the Australian Open, becoming the youngest man in the history of professional tennis to complete the career Grand Slam. Let that sink in for a second. Career Grand Slam. All 4 majors. Before the age of 23. He went to Melbourne and he did what Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic all needed years and years and years to do, and he did it while most people his age are still figuring out what to have for breakfast. He then went to Doha and won another title, extending what already looks like one of the most remarkable starts to a calendar year in the history of the sport. So when Carlos Alcaraz walked onto that stage in Madrid last night, he wasn't just picking up an award for 2025. He was picking up an award that represents the cumulative weight of a career trajectory that is genuinely frightening in the best possible way. This is a man who won his first Grand Slam at 19, became the youngest world number 1 in ATP history at 19, has now won 7 Grand Slam titles, and just received the greatest individual sports honor on the planet. He is 22 years old. His speech was everything you could have asked for. He stood there in front of the world and said that 3 years ago, he walked into the Laureate ceremony in Paris as a Breakthrough Award winner, a kid in awe, staring at Lionel Messi who was collecting the Sportsman award. He said that in that moment, he allowed himself to dream. He thought, maybe one day, I could be on that list too. Messi, Federer, Djokovic, Nadal. And now, he said, he is. He is on that list. He follows in the footsteps of giants, and those were his exact words, he is following in the footsteps of giants. And then, and this is the moment that made the hair stand up on the back of every tennis fan in the room, he turned his attention to Jannik Sinner. He looked out and he said that without Sinner across the net, pushing him to the absolute limit every single time they meet, he doesn't think either of them would have reached the levels they have. He credited his greatest rival. He acknowledged that their rivalry doesn't just produce great tennis, it produces greatness, period. In each other, they find the version of themselves that the rest of the world didn't know existed. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a champion speaking. That is someone who understands that the greatest pressure forges the greatest diamonds. But now we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The wrist brace. The thing that every camera at that ceremony kept drifting back to, the thing that is sitting in the back of every tennis fan's mind like a slow, uncomfortable drumbeat. Carlos Alcaraz arrived at the Laureate Awards wearing a protective cast on his right wrist. Not a bandage. Not a sleeve. A cast. His wrist was fully immobilized. And for a man who generates his power and his extraordinary ball striking through that exact wrist, the sight of it strapped up like that sent shockwaves through the tennis community. Here's the timeline of what happened. Alcaraz arrived at the Barcelona Open just over a week ago, which should have been a comfortable early clay court swing for him. He went out and beat Otto Vertanen convincingly, winning 6-4, 6-2. But during that match, toward the end of the first set, the cameras caught him wincing. He took a medical timeout. Something was clearly wrong with the wrist. And even though he won that match, he withdrew from the tournament the following day after undergoing scans. He then withdrew from the Madrid Open, the Masters 1000 event being held in his home country, the city where he was receiving the Laureate Award for the second consecutive year. Gone. Scratched. On the sidelines. And then photos emerged. Not of Alcaraz on a practice court or hitting balls. Photos of Alcaraz at a restaurant in Spain, sitting there with his right wrist completely immobilized in an elaborate splint, the kind of brace that makes you immediately reach for your phone and start catastrophizing. Social media went into full panic mode, as social media always does. Fans were asking, how serious is this? What exactly is wrong? Is he going to be okay? Is the clay season over before it even began? Then, on the red carpet in Madrid, before the ceremony even started, reporters gathered around him and the questions came fast. Is he going to play the French Open? He paused. He didn't give a reassuring smile and say, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Instead, he said something that sent a chill through every court vision-having tennis fan in the world. He said, "We'll have to wait and see. The next test will be crucial." He said they are doing everything in their power to make sure the test goes well.
It means like a dream come true. I do remember back in 2023 when I went on the breakthrough of the year. I told my team, I told my family, I just how to win.
He said he's trying to be patient, trying to stay positive, but admitted the days are getting long. He said he doesn't know yet what the next steps will be. All decisions hinge on upcoming medical tests. And just in case that wasn't enough to keep you up at night, when he accepted the award on stage, he addressed the injury directly and said something quietly devastating. He said, "I have a long career ahead of me. Forcing my way back for Roland Garros could penalize me enormously in the future." There it is. The man himself is telling you that skipping Roland Garros is on the table. That protecting the next decade of his career matters more to him than chasing a third consecutive French Open title. And honestly, that's the right mentality. That is the mentality of someone playing the long game. But it doesn't make it any easier to hear. Because here's what's at stake. Carlos Alcaraz is the defending champion at both the Italian Open and Roland Garros. He won both of those events last year, meaning he is sitting on approximately 4,300 ranking points that he needs to defend across those two tournaments. If he doesn't play them, those points evaporate. Gone. And with Jannik Sinner having already reclaimed the world #1 ranking after beating Alcaraz in the Monte Carlo final earlier this month, the ranking implications of a prolonged absence are enormous. Sinner, for his part, has been waiting for this moment. The only Grand Slam missing from his trophy cabinet is Roland Garros. He has won the Australian Open twice. He has won Wimbledon. He won the US Open. He has won the ATP Finals back-to-back. But the red clay of Paris has eluded him. And the man standing between him and that dream, the man who has beaten him in the last two French Open finals, is currently in a wrist brace waiting on test results. If Alcaraz is absent from Roland Garros, Sinner walks into that tournament as the overwhelming favorite to finally complete his own slam collection. This, folks, is the brutal theater of professional tennis. The sport gives you a glittering award ceremony in Madrid on a Monday night, and then reminds you on Tuesday morning that your king's wrist is in a splint and his biggest tournament of the year is in serious doubt. Now let's not forget the other remarkable storyline woven into this glorious ceremony, because it deserves its own chapter. Who were the co-hosts of the 2026 Laureus World Sports Awards? Novak Djokovic and Eileen Gu. Novak Djokovic, the man who has won this Sportsman Award 4 times. The man who held the record as the most decorated men's tennis Laureus winner. Standing on that stage, passing the ceremonial torch, symbolically, at least, to the new face of the sport he spent 2 decades dominating. That is a moment rich with meaning. Djokovic hosting a ceremony where Alcaraz receives the award Djokovic himself knew so well. It is the kind of passing of the guard that sport occasionally delivers, and when it arrives, it hits differently. And while we're on the subject of the ceremony itself, the awards didn't stop with Alcaraz. Aryna Sabalenka walked away with the Laureus World Sportswoman of the Year award, joining an elite list that includes Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, and a handful of the most decorated female athletes in history.
And the Laureus World Sportswoman is Aryna Sabalenka.
Sabalenka, who has been a force of pure devastating power for several years now, finally got the global recognition her excellence demands. Lando Norris took home the Breakthrough of the Year award in Formula One, a sport absolutely electric right now following his emergence as a genuine world championship contender. And Rory McIlroy, who wasn't even present at the ceremony, received the Comeback of the Year award for finally winning the Masters at Augusta last April, completing his own career Grand Slam in golf in one of the most emotionally resonant moments in the sport's recent history. McIlroy delivered a pre-recorded speech that acknowledged how those years of near misses and heartbreak were not the end of the story, they were the fuel. But the headline belongs to Alcaraz. It always was going to. The beauty and the cruelty of sport is that it never stops. You win the greatest individual award in global athletics, you deliver a speech that gives people chills, you stand in the footsteps of giants. And the next morning the countdown clock to your next match is still ticking, the ranking points are still on the line, and your wrist is still in a brace. There is no pause button. There is no extended moment to simply enjoy the trophy before reality comes flooding back in. But if there is one thing we have learned about Carlos Alcaraz, it is this: he is not afraid of difficulty. He has come back from 2 sets down to win Grand Slam finals. He has recovered from injury before. He has faced the biggest moments, the most hostile crowds, the most intense pressure, and found a way through. He is 22 years old with the mental architecture of a champion who has already seen the worst and the best this sport has to offer. So maybe, just maybe, in a few days' time, the test results will come back and the news will be better than we fear. Maybe he'll be on a practice court in Rome. Maybe he'll be sliding into a forehand on the red clay of Roland Garros with that unmistakable brilliance and that half-grin that drives his fans absolutely wild. Maybe we'll look back at this wrist brace moment as just another chapter in the mythology of Carlos Alcaraz, the kid who keeps finding ways to come back stronger. And if not, if the clay season has to wait, then Alcaraz will be watching Roland Garros from somewhere with that statuette on a shelf nearby. The Laureus World Sportsman of the Year. The youngest man to complete the career Grand Slam. The man who beat Sinner, Pogacar, Duplantis, and Marquez for the biggest individual prize in sport. A man with 7 Grand Slams at 22 and a career that, by every reasonable projection, has barely even started. Either way, the crown belongs to Carlos Alcaraz. A wrist brace can't take that away. And on that note, if you are watching Court Vision Plus, you already know that this channel exists because this sport does things to your heart that nothing else can replicate. If you loved this video, please give it a like right now, because it genuinely helps more people find this content and join the conversation. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you worried about Alcaraz's wrist? Do you think he plays Roland Garros? And if he doesn't, is Sinner the automatic favorite? I want to hear everything you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and make sure you never miss a moment from us. Court Vision Plus, where the tennis never stops and neither do we.
Carlos Alcaraz.